Agora sim.
Good morning, everyone. We're live on YouTube.
E agora sim. Foi? Went? Foi. Deixa eu entrar aqui. Ok. Got it, guys. Bom, podemos começar, né? Deixa eu ver aqui, deixa eu colocar o YouTube aqui do lado.
Yes, you can, and you are.
Posso começar? Deixa eu entrar aqui. Ok, vamos ver. Temos 7 pessoas, agora eu estou olhando aqui no YouTube, o pessoal acabou sendo, bom dia pessoal, o pessoal acabou sendo kicked out do YouTube porque a gente entrou, saiu, então, mas agora estamos ao vivo, certo, Nath? Estamos...
All clear.
All clear. Então, eu vou começar dando bom dia para quem já está aqui, dando bom dia para todos os participantes e para nossos convidados. But we're going to do this in English, and then we're going to switch to Portuguese. After all, we are a bilingual SIG, right? So we're going to go back and forth all morning with our languages, because we are all bilingual speakers. So I'd like to start, guys, by saying, by giving a warm welcome to everybody to our BRAZ-TESOL Teachers Month. And this is our event produced and prepared and organized by the BRAZ-TESOL Bilingual Education SIG Special Interest Group. So we have a very, our aim is to discuss bilingual education in Brazil, its possibilities, its challenges, in fact, right? And what we can do to provide better education, better bilingual education, bilingual programs, bilingual curriculums to our students, and how to implement that in schools. And this is the main aim of our event today. Our program is on screen, so you can see what we are going to do this morning. We are going to have 2 webinars starting. We're going to have 2 webinars. The first webinar is with Siqueira, Possibilidades das diretrizes curriculares da educação bilíngue em escola pública. And the second one with Lia Armelin, Impactos, oops, sorry, I have it twice here. I'm reading from the wrong one. With Lia, Impactos das diretrizes curriculares nas escolas de rede particular do ensino with Lia. And then we're going to have a quick break, and we are going to suggest you go to another free event, okay? Also related, it's not a BRAZ-TESOL event, but it's also related to bilingual education. So we strongly suggest that you can spend this break watching a different webinar. And when we come back, we're going to have a Roda de Conversa, right? With Bianca Palumbo, one of the founding members of the BRAZ-TESOL Bilingual Education SIG, is going to mediate. And we have Selma Moura and Rita Ladeia, who are also founding members of the BRAZ-TESOL Bilingual Education SIG. And also Sherina, which is a guest speaker. And they are going to discuss the new education after and during the pandemic, right? So this is what our morning is going to look like. You have the programs and the times there. So without further ado, I'm going to present Ivan, and he's going to start his webinar. So Ivan, welcome. So let me just find here. So Ivan Siqueira é doutor em Artes Liberais pela USP, professor da Escola de Comunicações e Artes, também da USP, onde ele ensina English for Academic Purposes, English Language, História da Arte. Ele foi professor convidado de línguas estrangeiras na Universidade de Kyoto e pesquisador na Kyoto International Manga Museum. Desde 2016, ele está no National Board of Education e é o presidente da Basic Chamber. Eu tenho ele em português e inglês, a sua biodata aqui, tá? Por isso que tá back and forth. E ele foi um dos principais articuladores das novas diretrizes curriculares de educação bilíngue do Brasil. So, without further ado, Ivan, seja bem-vindo, tá? Eu ia falar the floor is yours, mas na verdade the screen is yours now. Okay, so I'm going to stop mine. You can take over.
Thank you, Mrs. Daphne Obode. I would like to say a warm good morning for everyone, for all the other panelists, and to thank the invitation, especially Rita Ladeia, who calls me if I am able to talk about the challenge and the opportunity about bilingual school, especially in public education in Brazil. So it's an honor for me to be with you and to share some thoughts and some challenges, because I believe that we have to find solutions together. It's not a task, it's not a work for just one single person. In order to improve our education, I believe that bilingual movement should encompass also not only private institution, but also public institution. And of course, because of the number, we have more than 80% of our students in public institution. So in order to increase this opportunity to make bilingual education available for the majority of our students, 47 million students that we have in basic education, I think we should think and we should establish a policy to address their necessities. So I will try to share my screen in order to start a conversation with some image, because today we know that image is one of the key points of conversation. We use it to talk with image. So again, thank you very much for the invitation, and BRAZ-TESOL National, all the members and the people and the panelists that are working here this morning and all day long. I think we have some challenges related to our situation. Then I'm going to try to address some of them. Of course, it's more than that, but I think one of the big issues that we have in order to make bilingual education available for our students in public education, especially, it has to do with some kind of social challenges, because we have a structural inequality in Brazil. No matter what city you are, no matter what state you are, you'll find a problem like this. We know by numbers exactly, because today we have a statistic. Every year we have a national statistic made by INAP, and we have the numbers, and we know exactly where they are. We have the number, have the CPF for all students, some kind of ID. So we know exactly what the problem is. So you have to act. So some of the structural inequalities is related because our federation is very difficult. In fact, some people say that you can't find another federation as Brazil, because we have 14 years of basic education, and 11 of them is upon municipality administration. But they don't have the 11 part of the budget related to education, you know? So municipalities have 11 years from 14 years of basic education, but they don't have the same structure. We have more than 5,000 cities, and we know that the majority of these cities have up to 50,000 people. So the majority that we have is small city. So these are the problem, because they don't have staff, they don't have quality, they don't know how to do it. This is a major problem that we have in many cities in our country.
Indeed, Ivan, and sorry to interrupt, a very important discussion. Could you put your presentation full screen, if you don't mind?
Oh, for sure.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Better now?
Yes, perfect, thank you.
Okay, so we have 83% of our students in municipal schools. So we know where they are our students. And unfortunately for us, this was close to the pandemic COVID-19 started. So it was about March and April when we started a study about the social condition of our students. So at that time, of course, it's worse now, because we know the unemployment just grew since then. But at that time, between March and April, 83% of our students in municipal schools, they belong to families who has just one minimum salary per month, which means about 1,000 reais. We know that today is about 700 or 800 reais, is about something about that. I think this should be enough to understand the problem that we have because of this social situation. And because of unemployment rates, we know that this condition is worse now. We have 79% of the students in public schools, they have access to internet. This is a good news, but what is the problem? The problem is that 46% of them have just opportunity to use mobiles, you know? So it's impossible to study, to acquire all the information, to recover the information, to process, to lead with just using mobiles. Depending on the tasks that you have to do, especially in school education, you need something like a laptop or a larger device, so you can make other things that is impossible to make it using mobiles. And of course, we have the problem of broadband, because in Brazil, in general, our broadband is narrow, is not broad at all. Another problem is that 2/3 of them have no computer at home. So this is the scenario that we have in public education in Brazil. In this case, 2/3 of them is putting together the students from municipal and state schools. So 2/3 of them together, they have no computer at home, so they will use only mobiles in their education environment. So because of that situation, of course, we should use this condition in order to, for example, to deliver different types of class, different types of lessons, and different types of instruction. But this is not happening because of the problems that we already know. Another problem that I think we should think is related to education challenges, because of course, there's a connection between social and education, but we have things related to education. And one of them, I will say, is the dropout rates. We are still having many students just dropping out from the school, unfortunately. Of course, we have improved, because if we consider 20 years ago, for example, we have few students coming to school. Today, we have about 95% of them with 6 years old coming to our school. 95% is almost what we call universalization. We are very close to that. In some states, we have more than 95%. We have 97, 98, or close to 100%. The problem is that we lose many of them during the time. You know, when we are in Ensino Fundamental 2, from 6th to 9th grade, we lose 10 or 15% of them. You know, the middle point, of course, the middle is our problematic, because the mediate, you can take the 1, 3, or 3 numbers and you put the median on them, but the median usually hides all the others that are completely far away. Okay, but this is just to have an idea of how many students we are losing in our schools today. I mean, public schools. When we are in high school, the tragedy is almost completely, you know, from 95% of them, just 79 and 66%. The first number is related to white students, and the second number is related to Black students, okay? So when we finish high school, we lose about 29% of Black students and about 16% of white students in the whole country. It's too much. And we have just 16% of those who finish high school coming to higher education, and about 7 or 80% of them coming to some kind of technological education. What about the others? Empty, nothing. So these are the problems that we have. We should be aware in order to find together a solution for that. And I do believe that we know that we have several evidence, but one of the evidence that I usually put online, I'd like to emphasize, is that the phrase about OECD PISA in 2004, and says that students' reading engagement, it's a better predictor of literacy performance than socioeconomic background, which means we can help these students if they start to read, and they start to read in a good manner, they start to read in a way that is significant, that has identification with them, so we can change the curve, we can change their lives. If we work together and if we provide opportunity and good education, especially for those who have poor social condition. So we know that we have a lot of evidence, we have a lot of research showing that it's possible to change. This should not be understood as nature. This should not be understood as something that we can't do nothing and just say student going out from our school in this amount of number and just doing nothing. I can't understand that as a society. How can we accept this kind of problem? And I do believe that bilingual education can help in some way to engage this student, to make them believe that education could be a good way, a good starting point in their lives. Another thing that I believe is important, it's pedagogical challenge, because we should be aware about the condition that the teachers have in our municipals, in our states, in our secretaries, in our schools, in the staff, all the things together. Why? Because based on that reality, not the things that we desire to have, but the reality that we have, we should be able to design, we should be able to build, should be able to construct a policy that could fit exactly the necessity of local problems. Problems like these, and unfortunately, these are national problems. It's not related to one or another city, but it's possible to see this kind of problem all over the country. Of course, you can have more or less, depends on the social challenge, it depends on the staff that you have. If you are in a big city with more people educated who have more education opportunity and years and attendance, especially university and this kind of degree, but this is not the rule. So we have lack of pedagogical support because I remember when I was talking about teachers in Rio de Janeiro about what made the success about bilingual education in public institution in Rio, and some of them said to me, well, when we start to use some kind of support, some kind of material, we have a problem because we don't know how to use this material because the material is completely different related to the capital, related to the life of our students. So it doesn't fit, it doesn't help. We have to explain things that were unnecessary to explain because of the material. When we have the material that fit our necessity, I mean students, it was so much easier to process, to make the word, and of course, to have more understanding and more learning process than on the other side. So pedagogical support, how can you use this? And if you have this kind of problem, how can you act? How can you lead with this kind of problem? For example, when you have a material that doesn't fit your audience, for example. The second problem is related to bilingual material and methodology, because sometimes, especially in public school, they receive material that they don't know how they came up, and they don't know how to use it because they don't have training for that most of the time. Some students and some teachers said to me, and some families said something. So another problem is related to inadequacy of instructional materials. Some of the materials are completely outside of what we are supposed to have in our education system, you know? Appropriate cultural representation is another problem because, and we have this in our national PNLD, we have the same problem because sometimes I remember when I was 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was working the process, there was a teacher from Rondônia, he said, this has nothing to do with our students. We don't have subway in Rondônia. How can I use this material? Because this material doesn't help us. We have to explain things that we don't have, and our students don't know. And they always ask, why we don't have what we have here in our materials? Why we don't have our image in our books? Why we don't have our reality? Why we don't have our rivers? Why we don't have our names, our numbers, and these kind of things? So identity affirmation is something very, very important for learning process, because you can't learn if you are not identified with the material. You know that. We have information, we have research highlighting and emphasizing that. So we should struggle to have this kind of material, good material, not only material, but good material. Content tools assessment is another set of problem because unfortunately, sometimes we have good materials, we have some kind of identity, but we don't have assessment. So we don't know if students are learning or not. And if they are learning in a good way, in a good grade, if they're learning and the velocity as they are able to do that. Okay, this is a problem. So without assessment, and I mean assessment related to students, related to teachers, because without assessment, how can you say that the thing is working on? Well, how can you say that you're doing good if you don't have assessment systematically, you know? And the other problem is related to parental involvement. And here the problems is exactly what I said in our previous slide, because if you have poor families, if you have families whose father or mother sometimes is in prison, how can you work together with them if they are not available for that? Unfortunately, this is a reality for many of our students, especially in public education and in municipal school. This is not an exception, unfortunately. This is common in many cities. I have had the experience to work with students who has both parents, father and mother, in prison for long years. So they live with their grandma, you know, so they don't have exactly people who has respond for them directly. It's an uncle, it's a old brother, and things like that. It's very difficult to work with that. And sometimes they are, of course, depending on the justice that in our country is not so good that we should have or we should like it. Okay. Another problem that I believe we should struggle with is related to political change, because this is not about us, this is about policy. So in order to establish a policy related to bilingual education in public institution, we depend on policy, it depends on politicians, especially in cities, Because if the prefecture say, well, I'm not interested in that, forget it. It doesn't work. Of course, we can put pressure. We can make the society understand that this is an important thing related to the improvement of education. But this decision, this possibility to make it, to make the starting point of bilingual education in public institution has significant part with prefecture, with the authorities, unfortunately or fortunately. So the examples that we have always this characteristic, especially in municipals, especially in cities. That's explain why we have most of our bilingual education programs, different programs, but most of our bilingual education, especially in public institutions, are related to big cities, not small or medium cities. Most of them are related to big cities. And the reason is clear. Why? Because the prefecture, because the administration is in some way interested with that, because he or she was sensible, and sometimes because of the policy interest to use that kind for election, you know? So sometimes when the election turn is over, they are not interested to provide the facilities and the condition to continue to work in a good manner, as we professionals know that it should be. So we need a plan, we need a program, but a program that adapts to everyone, not to a few students, to fortunate students, not to a few group of them. So we need availability of teachers, because it's impossible to start a bilingual education program in public institution without teachers. In fact, it's the same in private institution. But we know that in private schools, we have some kind of problem, because half of them all over the country are not exactly, they're going back because they don't have the professional condition in order to continue to work year by year. So it depends on the city. We have, in general, 50% of the teachers or the staff going back every year. So it depends on the policy, depends on the prefecture interest to make availability or vehicle for them. So this is another problem, because without good teachers, without people who has the ability, how can you establish a program? And how can you make this program continue for the second or third year without a good teacher and a good staff? And this is not easy to solve. We need another basic competency standard. We should establish things that in the middle, not so easy, because you should motivate people to go in forth, but it's not so difficult that people will give up. So you should find a middle point in order to make people motivated, students and teachers, so we can go forward continuously and improve continuously. This should be the key in order to establish a policy for public institutions. Another point is that professional development for teachers, because teachers should be motivated to engage with that kind of education. Because of course they should put money, they should invest in themselves. And of course they won't do it if they don't have motivation to do it. You know, we live in a capitalist system, so teachers say, okay, what do I gain with that? So we need some kind of a policy related to professional development for teachers to engage with this activity and to continue to study, to continue to research, to continue to make them more competent to exercise their profession in bilingual education. And you know that material is expensive. Is not easy to have access to good material and to continue to be updated. So this costs money. So we need some kind of a policy to address this problem. And this should be a policy, not to individually act that we usually put under the children's and the teachers, excuse me. So assessments of competence, cross-curricular approach. So we should establish a way, an environment where teachers can have facilities, not all the difficulties that when you are working in a public institution and we have a group. I have talked with some secretaries of states in the last 2 months or 1.5, and some of them said to me, okay, we have here in our school, in our secretary, we have 4, 5, 6, or 10 teachers, extremely motivated, extremely interested to establish some grade of bilingual education. I think this is not fair. Of course, we should count with this kind of motivation, but we should establish policy, because if it is 3, 4, or 5 teachers demotivated for any reason, So the program will be over. And what about the students? What about the investment that we have made? So I believe we should have a movement, should have a policy to address this. So we shouldn't depend upon one person or another. It should depend on person, but it should depend, of course, on policy, structural. That's how when we see the programs that have succeed, we usually see this not only in Brazil, but in Latin America, all over the country, and all over the world that we have seen and read. We've seen that we have common steps. And one of them is related to how to make the work not impossible for teachers who are motivated to work in this kind of education. And language development, teachers training, because as I said, we usually to see bilingual education, public institution, mostly in big cities. And what about the students who live in small cities? And they are the majority of them. What about them? Of course, in small city and medium city, it's so much hard to find out teachers with that kind of a specialty, with that kind of degree, teacher who knows enough the second language in order to start. But we need to motivate this team, this prefecture, this administration, and the teacher to provide teachers training. And of course, they should count, because we are federation, they should count with national budget and sometimes a state budget. The problem is that the municipal or the local administration, they are responsible for the majority of the education system, but they do not have the same amount of money related to the responsibilities they have. This is a problem, especially for basic education. And another problem that's to establish bilingual education, I strongly believe that we can't accept that bilingual education cannot just be for those who can afford its price. I do believe that we can't accept that bilingual education is just for people who has money. It's just for people who has better condition. I do believe that we should find it as a society, as a teachers, as people who has responsibility for our future, that bilingual education and the good things that bilingual education can afford, can provide it, could be for more of our students. We can accept that just about 8 or 10% of them have the opportunity to engage with this kind of ability, to know that, we know the cognitive benefits related to bilingual education, all the things related to that. And I believe that we can just accept that this is just for a few people and there's nothing we can do. I completely disagree with that. I believe that we can make a huge improvement in public education with bilingual education. I know I don't believe in silver bullet, but I have the numbers, and I'm extremely convinced that we can improve, of course, step by step, but we can improve a lot. And the proof is that when we compare bilingual education in any kind of system, any kind of peers, any kind of structure of bilingual education in public institution, we have better developed position, we have better developed statistics related to educators and related to students. And they are the same. They have the same social condition, bad social condition, poor family, no reading before schools, all these problems that we have said, they have. But when they have opportunity, they improve, they grow, they develop themselves in a better way. So we know that this kind of opportunity or this kind of education can improve our society as a whole. Why not to make it available for more students? And why? I believe that if you don't make, especially English, because English is a Franco language, we know that is the language of science, is the language of innovation, is the language of internet, web, and all of the things that drives innovation. If you don't make available for a larger number of students, we will fail as a society, because we are moving, we are changing our demography. In 20 years or 25 or 30 years, no more than that, we will see a completely different society. We will have more old people than youngest. We know that. We know the numbers. We are changing our demography. For the first time in our history, Brazil will are becoming a country of more adults, more old people than a youngest one. We know that. So we're going to face a big problem. Why? Who will pay the bill? Because if you not have enough people to make the innovation, to make the production with things that has value, who can pay our bill, our system We can pay all the things that we need as a country that will start and become with majority of old people and all the consequences related to that. Who's going to pay the bill? And who's going to drive the innovation? Who's going to make the thing that could make our nation more competitive in the concept of our nation? Who will make this? Just a few, 60% of our students who are coming to our university is not enough, 16%. We can't face all these problems that we have with just 16%. And 60%, of course, are the whole number, the whole amount of them. It is not that we have 16% able with this ability to drive this kind of innovation, Internet things, artificial intelligence, and all the innovation that we have seen in the last 10 or 5 years. Just 5 or 6% of our students that go, who has a opportunity to develop this competence and skill is not enough. It's not enough. So you're going to face serious problem if you don't change, if you don't make a good education and English available to more students. And finally, more, if this was not enough, we have more. When we look at all the information that we have about the future, in fact, it's not future because it's here now. Some people said that we just moved 20 years in these last years because of COVID-19 pandemic in all the things related to that. So we know that even today, the good job, the job that has value, the job that most of our students would like to engage with, most of them, they require new behaviors. You should be able to lead and to work with information, which means new technology. You should be able to understand the changing, because you should be able to learn all the time because the changing movement, because of the obsolescence of technological. In order to create, in order to innovate, in order to dialogue with these constant movement, you should be able to understand and to process that in a different way that old generation was doing. And mobility, because, for example, when I was in China, I remember to see 100 families, I'm not saying 100 people, 100 Brazilian families in China. And when I asked them, well, how long you have been here? They say 1 year, 2 years, no more than that. And they were younger. Most of them, what about 25 or 30 years old? In China, in many different countries, you can see lots and lots and lots of Brazilian younger, in about 20 or 30 years old. Most of them are between 20 and 30s. You know, so we should educate our students for a globalized world, because we don't know where they're going to be for the next 5 years, the next 2 years. We don't know. When I ask to them, for example, in China, well, what brings you here in China? They say, well, I received an invitation for that. I know a person, my colleague, someone invite me. But anyway, in just 6, 7, or 1 year, I see myself here working. But I have no idea before 2 years ago or before to come here, I have no idea that I would be here in China or in other countries. In Estonia, for example, I also find out there lots of Brazilian people working in education, working in development of technology. And of course, globalization and COVID-19 pandemic, it was a bad side of the coin to show that we are living in a globalized world. It is very quickly, very fast to see the effects, the consequence of globalized injuncture. It could be economical, it could be pandemic, it could be education, it could be related to all these things together. So in order to survive in this new world, we should be able to understand, and we should be able to provide understanding for our students. Okay, so I think this could help us to think a little bit more about the challenges and the opportunity that we have in order to establish bilingual education for more Brazilian students, not only the few number, 80 or 10% close to that now have the opportunity, even consider the increasement of this number. So it's just a few number related to the majority of them, about 47 million students that we have before the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic situation. So I strongly believe that as a nation, not just as a member of the National Council, because of course I'm there for just a while, but I will continue to work as a teacher. But as a Brazilian citizen, I believe that we should work in order to fix this kind of problem, because otherwise you're going to suffer the consequence of that. And I do believe that bilingual education could improve a lot some of the problems that we have in our education. So thank you very much. I think this is our...
Thank you, Eva. It was a pleasure listening from you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, this is Juliana Chanel. I'm one of the BRAZ-TESOL Bilingual Education SIG leaders. It was a pleasure listening from you, Eva Siqueira. And thank you one more time for your effort and for all your hard work. It's been a thrill to hear all of that, especially towards bilingual education. We have been working so hard in this area, and it soothes our heart to see that someone has finally been looking at it and the constitutional side of it. I'm gonna have the honor and pleasure now to introduce our next presenter, Lia Armelin, who's someone who I'm very fond of for personal and professional reasons. I met Lia about 17 years ago, where I had the pleasure to teach her children in one of the first, if not the first, bilingual school in São Paulo. And I've learned a lot from her. Back then I was an assistant, and now our ways kept on crossing, and now we're here together. And I'm gonna read her bio data, and I would like you to take a look and pay attention to what Eva had said about public schools. And now let's have a parallel and take a look at some of the aspects that Lia will mention about private schools. Before I introduce Lia properly, I would like to thank everybody who's here, and also everybody who's been following our SIG profile in Instagram, because it has been only 9 days and we have more than 180 followers and people who have been interacting with us in our feed, in our stories. So it is very important for us, because the more you interact with us, the more it helps us to be seen and to spread the news and information about bilingual education, Brazil and worldwide, if not. So let's go back to Lia. Lia will talk about the impact of the guidelines of bilingual education in private schools. I'm going to read it in, okay, I need a zoom here. Lia Armelin has been teaching English as a second language since 1985, initially in language schools and private tutoring for almost 2 decades, serving all ages in diverse areas from banking to medicine. For the past 19 years, she has gone from teacher to coordinator and now principal in bilingual schools. She designed and currently coordinates the middle and high school curriculum of the schools where she has been working for the past 15 years. CISO Panambi Bilingual School. She holds a bachelor degree in psychology at PUC São Paulo, specialization in psychodrama also at PUC São Paulo, and a master in science in education, specialized in curriculum instruction and assessment at Walden University, Massachusetts. It is my pleasure and proud to introduce Lia Armelin. Thank you, Lia. You have the word. Nachi, if you could please. Thank you.
Hi. So good morning to everyone. Have you passed me the presenter so I can share my screen, Joe?
Could you please
share a screen?
Okay, great. Super.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, I'd like to first thank you very much for inviting me. It's an honor to be here with BRAZ-TESOL and especially with SIG, Bilingual Education. I really admire the work you've done, that you've created this group to discuss bilingual education. It's been a long time we've needed this, and I'm really happy that you guys have taken this forward. I especially thank Juliana. Indeed, we have been somewhat partners, far but very near, right? We've been crossing each other at events, but I hold you very dear because indeed you were my kid's teacher, and I remember it very well. It's funny how when you're a teacher, you remember your students, but I mean, you have many students. Although you remember them, you can't remember them like so clearly. Sometimes you see them after and it's not so, like you don't know exactly who that is. But teachers, it's funny that they just stick with you, right? And it's not just your teachers, but your kids' teachers. So I hold you very dear. Remember those days. Jan was learning how to read and he learned so well in both languages at the same time. So thank you so much for the work. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I'll be talking to you a little bit about the impacts of these directives on private schools, but you'll be surprised that it doesn't really work that way, right? So let me start sharing my screen. Just a moment. I need to share some things here. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can, but it's not full screen yet.
It's not full screen. No problem. Just getting something out of the way here. Okay, just a second. I'm getting some messages here. Okay, here we go. So very well. I work at Seesaw, as you can see. So I've been there for the last almost 16 years, and it's been a long ride. So you'll find out a little about that as I talk. And as I start with this image that I think portrays very well how I feel about bilingual education. Okay, you can see that it's an image that it's kind of, I don't know, it brings mixed feelings, right? And it's sort of how I feel. And maybe you'll get a little glimpse of that as I present to you. I'm going to start on a very personal note. So I'm going to ask you to do something a little different, right? For this kind of screen presentation, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes a little. And I'd like to invite you to take this journey with me. It's a journey back to a long time ago. That's back in the 70s. Back when we didn't have digital sound, right? Sound was very noisy, right? When we heard recordings of audios, they had a lot of background noise. Quality wasn't very good. And we used to record things on what we called tape recorders, things that my kids look at today and they say, how do you work this? How do you do this? And I'd like you to close your eyes just to take a moment and listen to this audio. And as you're listening, I'd like to ask you to consider what exactly is going on. Okay, who are these people on the audio? What are they doing? What's this interaction they have? And how does this relate to bilingual education or the bilingual experience, if you would? So here we go.
Grandma, how are you? Fine. Oh, did you know that Sandra had a bad cold? Really? Yeah.
Tell her about the bird's nest.
Passarinho.
Ela tem
You say it, because I don't know.
You say it in English and I say it in Portuguese, okay?
No.
We have a nest with 4 little birds.
No, I don't want to tell her that. I just want to tell her about the fair.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know that there was a Boy Scout fair and a Cub Scout one? Oh, I see. So, puppet show, and the boy got lost.
Let's sing a song, okay?
Yeah? But not in Portuguese.
No, in English. She likes English songs. Which one? Shall I turn it off until we make up our minds?
Yeah.
Okay.
My little chickadees sang at the door. One flew away and then there was 4. Chickadee, chickadee, happy and gay. chickadee, chickadee, fly away, fall.
Very well. So as you heard that, try to think a little now of the questions I made. So who are these people? What's happening? What's this interaction they're having? What languages are they speaking? What's going on? Why are they doing this? Is this a recording? What for? And think about this context. Where is this happening? Okay. So here I bring it to you. So here's this little girl, right? She's 5. This is 1971. She's happy and gay, as you can see. Very, very happy. She's where she has to be. She feels very, very much like herself, right? And as you could notice, there was a mix of languages happening, but clearly for her, there was one language that for her was a language she wanted to speak. It was a language that spoke from her heart. It was the way she wanted to communicate with whomever it was that she was talking to. And the second picture, as you see it, and this is 1971, this is La Jolla, San Diego. The second picture is already in Brazil. Okay, so this first girl, she's about 5. Second, same girl. Now she's 7. Okay, she's in Brazil. She arrived in Brazil. No school would accept her because she couldn't speak the language of the country, which was Portuguese. I mean, she could understand, but she could not speak it. She was absolutely literate. She could read and write. She was a very good reader, a very good writer already in the language that she called her own, that was English. But for the country where she came from, that was Brazil, they wouldn't accept her. Okay, she had to learn how to read and write. She was not adequate for the time being. She was 7, and that was the age children was supposed to learn how to read and write. And that's what this very small school did, accepted her with many conditions and taught her. As you can see, she has her cartilha in her hand and she's proud. She's learned how to read and write, but a very tough time, right? To recondition, retrain, learn Portuguese, learn how to read that cartilha properly without an accent, and so on. So that is kind of my personal perspective. So my personal experience, and back in the day when I lived that experience, and I have to say I lived it twice because I lived first in the 70s and second in the 80s as a teenager. So being bilingual in those days was considered a problem. Okay, it wasn't really desired. It was kind of a hurdle for education. People didn't really want it in the way. Learning the local language meant forgetting your own. I mean, it was like mainstream, please speak our language, just hop on the bus and do as we do. You know, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Culture could only be that one taught in school. So that was the culture you would take on. So when I first learned English and it became practically my first language, that came with a whole culture, that came with a whole set of elements that you know, built my identity. And that's what I called self at the time. But that was all taught in school. That came with that whole context where I was living. Fitting in meant molding yourself to that particular culture, right? So yeah, as you could notice, the mother was speaking English and the daughter was being very clear, like, we're not going to speak Portuguese here. You speak English to me. And that's what happened, okay? My household spoke English, although it was not their first language. It was not comfortable for them. And they adopted the customs, the habits, the lifestyle of that culture. That's what we did. We had breakfast, we had all you can imagine, the tooth fairy, everything. Having different cultures, speaking different languages was strange, was considered something very weird, very confusing, and really not desirable traits for people coming into a school. So the school made clear to take care of that very quickly so you could, you know, take mainstream and just follow as everybody else. Thankfully, life has changed over the years. And now what we call bilingualism back in the day didn't even have that name. I mean, I'd never heard of it when I was living it. That was not a thing, even in high school. And I was at a very, like a model high school that prided itself in having all these different nationalities and having an international club and respecting all the different languages, which wasn't really it. I mean, we had an international club, which happened after school, but the rest of the day was mainstream. And please join us, okay? Speak English, be American, and follow the rules. So back in that day, there was no bilingual education. And so I'm really happy that today we have at least terminology to call what it is that happens, right? These phenomena that have always been happening, right? This is no news to civilization. So bilingualism, multilingualism today, it's a political stand, okay? So I thank Ivan for all the hard work he's done and he's doing, because yeah, it's political. There's nothing, it is educational, but I'm sorry, number one on the list, it's political, okay? Because it acknowledges the different social groups, their cultures, their languages, their traditions. And we're not talking about English, we're talking about indigenous people. We're talking about people with special needs, such as the deaf and the mute. We're talking about people on borders, right? We're talking about torn up families that speak different languages because they're on different sides of the border, on different sides of the river. There are a variety of things. And Ivan, I think he sort of tapped into that. Like Brazil is really big. We have a variety of people in this country. They live very, very diverse realities. What we live here in São Paulo has nothing to do with Rondônia, absolutely nothing. So how can we speak from that standpoint? We don't know what goes on, right? So when we talk about bilingualism, we're talking about really, really giving space to that identity to be honored, right? To be valued and to be constructed. It creates bridges between different people and cultures. So it's kind of, it's convergent, right? It brings people together, it brings understanding. It opens new opportunities for professional collaboration and advancement. So the fact that you can speak those languages bridges you to other people and what they know and what they've learned, and knowledge just builds on itself, right? It expands our awareness and understanding of others, which I have said, right? We look at others with very different eyes. And as Ivan has already mentioned, science has already proven to us how many benefits bilingual education or multilingual education can bring to us in terms of our brain capacities, okay? So that is old news. I mean, it's becoming old after so many years that we've been hearing this. It's in the news, this is in mainstream media. So many people have already heard about this. Now, second language learning in a bilingual context is something very different. So for me, I spent many years working as an ELT teacher, working in language institutes, teaching English as a second language. And I love to do that. It was great fun. As Juliana was presenting me, I went from like teaching banking when I was in my 20s and had no clue about banking whatsoever, but I just pretended I did and I went with it, to really teaching medical students, PhDs and so on. But that was a very different setting. So I spent more than 2 decades teaching English as a second language, and I could see it coming. Like I could see, okay, we're doing simple present here. Now we're introducing the prepositions. Soon I'm going to be introducing the simple past. And it all followed a very logical pattern. Students, of course, responded differently because people have different skills and different rhythms of learning. But still, I mean, I could just, you know, follow my plan, and the plan worked really well. I was a successful teacher. Many students learned English. I am proud to say that I had a student, one of my first students at Berlitz back in the 1980s, and he was this very successful dentist. He was a special endodontist, which are those dentists that work with canals, but he was super famous, but he spoke nothing of English, nothing, zero. He didn't know book. And I made him into this very successful speaker, international speaker, researcher. He became like autonomous as a speaker and as a voice from Brazil in his area. So I'm so proud of that. And that was done through ELT. But as I went into bilingual education, and that's where I learned who I was, I said, oh, wow, there is a world that sort of works like me. Wow, I'm not so weird after all. And in that world, my plan didn't work well. My plan, I was very stubborn. I kept trying it over and over, reversioning, redesigning. No, I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for 2 decades. I know, and it didn't work. Okay, so it doesn't follow the same patterns seen in second language teaching. It's very messy, okay, because things come together, sometimes very complicated ideas with very simple things they should have known before, but they don't. And very unexpected in some ways, because sometimes it's the contrary. They bring a very complex grammar construction with something so basic that they haven't mastered yet. And that doesn't make sense, but it does. In bilingual education, makes all the sense. It's frustrating at times in that sense. So sometimes the accuracy and that they use for speaking or for writing is sometimes frustrating because you feel like, oh, they could have mastered that already. We could have been in another place now, but it's okay. The truth is that this mess, it keeps going over time. And as they're growing, at some point, things start coming together and they start making sense. We cannot eliminate these ties that bilingual education has with learning as a whole, because bilingual education is about giving education to children, starting very early. So we're talking about the development of a human being. So we're not just talking about second language acquisition, we're talking about the development of this person. And that involves so many other things, right? That develops the development of thinking, of critical thinking, of understanding of the world, of so many areas of study. So, and all that is happening at the same time, and sometimes in both languages, or sometimes in 3 languages. Okay, so all of this, of course, imagine that little mind trying to put all those pieces together. It takes a while. Sometimes they get confused. They don't know if it's that particular verb tense they should be using, but they are getting it together. Okay, their brains are working really hard. Of course, bilingual education is indissociable from one's origins. It builds on those foundations, on your identity, on who you are, where you come from. So what Ivan said about those people in Rondônia, yeah, if we're going to do bilingual education with those people, we need to know who they are and whatever they have there, if they have rivers, if they have the forest or not, or if they have some tales, some special, I don't know, children's traditions that they have, we have to include those, right? So about the document, here's the document, and I'm so proud to be here and with this celebration, right? Because it's been so many years. We've been looking so much to find this moment where we could come together and try to find directives, find standards that would guide what we do in bilingual education in Brazil. Of course, this document is not only about what I do, because I work in a private school, right? So what I did is I sort of chose some key terms that I found on the document, and I created a word cloud. And as you can see there, of course, the choice of the words was mine, but still those words are right there. They're in the document. And they're very important things, right? Inclusion is the big one, right? We need to include who you are, include where you come from, include your language, include everything, you know? And that doesn't work just for bilingual education, that works for education. And I've been feeling that for the last decade, that bilingual education and education are kind of going side by side, very hand in hand. So the family involved, this feeling of belonging, the social ties, right? This whole social structure that Ivan talked about so much, this intercultural exchange and all the benefits we get from this experience, right? The dominant language, right? National versus international, when that is the case. Sometimes they are 2 national languages. It could be an indigenous language, right? So it's not even international. And this whole thing about private, and something that I did mention about my personal experience, that was subtractive, right? My bilingual experience was subtractive. It asked me to forget my original language, whichever that was. And I lived it 2 to 3 times. And what we have today is bilingual education as an additive experience, right? That adding more, just adding, just bringing more to this game and making it even fuller. So the document brings considerations about different contexts of bilingual education, and that is really important, because sometimes people think bilingual education is English, Portuguese. No, Brazil's too big. We have many other problems that are much bigger than the simple problem of English and Portuguese. We have indigenous communities. We have people with special needs, such as the deaf and the mute. We have refugees, right? In the past years, we've been seeing this huge migration, and we've received so many of them. And refugees that are now joining public education, right? We have Syrians, we have Congolese, we have a number of Africans coming to Brazil, and they speak their language. They have their traditions, and they're going to public schools because they can't afford a private school that will take all the time to understand them and give them bilingual education, right? So bilingual education works in many different contexts, and I'm really happy that this document brings all that richness. The benefits and the social needs of bilingual or multilingual education, and that includes the public education and not just the private sector, right? They're both there in that document. The need for directives and standards that guide professional training, which Ivan has already tapped into, student learning, and so on. So that will be crucial for us, right? That we find better practices to train teachers, that we can have better professionals. And soon I'll be talking about some of those professions. And it gives also a historical background of bilingual education in Brazil. I was very happy because I learned some things that I didn't even know. It was very, very interesting to find out. Now, all the stakeholders in this whole thing of bilingual education now in the private sector. So schools can have more clear references and directives for the development of high quality bilingual education. So a school that wishes to have that kind of program, they know what are the basic elements they need to have. They have directives to guide them, right? Professionals can get more qualified training to work in the field, which will require that the universities develop and offer those courses. So universities will have to really dig into research and find out what it is that we need. And more than just learning from the experiences abroad, also think about what's going on here, right? All of that document brings that richness, right? So thinking of those different contexts, imagine for the indigenous people, what would that mean, right? What would be the directives for that? Maybe it wouldn't be the same as for English, Portuguese. Families will understand and more clearly what this bilingual education encompasses, right? What does that mean when I'm buying into a school that has bilingual education? What am I getting? What kind of program is this? What will it truly offer my children? Is it worth spending more money on it? Or a family in a public school, right? What are they doing? Why are they, like, my son's going to speak a language that I can't speak? What if he's saying something that he shouldn't be saying and I can't really get it? So I think those directives can help families understand how important it could be. Students will understand better what is expected of them and also what they can achieve through bilingual education. Again, because these children have, especially in the private sector, they start immersed in that second language. They start when they're 1.5, 2 years old. They're not really thinking about bilingual education. I mean, they just follow what is asked, right? They're just speaking that language. They sing the song, and then slowly teachers are enculturating them into this process. Of course, they are telling them the benefits and all that. But I think students are still very doubtful about what it is they're getting. Many times I feel they're just seeing it as learning English, learning the second language, when it's not, right? There's so much more. The private schools market. This is a very particular subject for Brazil. The competition has grown tremendously in the past decade. Many new players on the market, many new programs, many new approaches, many new names, right? Many different names. And of course, that is wonderful. That makes the market so much richer. And competition is always a driver of change. I really like that. But at the same time, confusing, right? For parents, for students, even for professionals, for teachers, it might be confusing. Like, what is it? Is it this approach or that approach? Do they both work? Is that really bilingual education? I see parents, for example, of 4-year-olds coming to talk to me at school. They want to know if we're doing IB program, and they have no idea what it is. No idea. They've just heard it through the grapevine that it's good, that I should have my kids in IB, but they don't know what it is. They call that a bilingual education, but anyway, there's so many things going on, and I think directives really help them understand that. The new players, these new players that are joining the game, a few of them are traditional schools. We've been seeing this more recently. These huge schools of hundreds of years that have been doing national education for so long and with such a high reputation, they've seen over the last few years how much this bilingual education has become something of importance, of like market-wise important. So they started to invest in it. And but are they really aware of what that means? Are they just buying programs and sort of implementing, or are they really taking the time to completely reversion their idea of education and train their professionals and so on? Bilingual has become this magic word, right? It's become sort of the money word, right? Where you see bilingual, ooh, that must be good. It's expensive, but it's fantastic. It's wonderful. I wonder if everybody who's buying into that word, if they know what exactly it means. Because for me personally, bilingual has nothing to do with money. It has to do with culture. It has to do with acknowledgement of the differences. So it is much less about the money. And that's where I think the private and the public, they are hand in hand. They can't be, we can't have this gap. And that leads me to my next question, which is bilingual schools and the elite in Brazil, because that's what's been happening. It's what Ivan said, right? Only the people who have money, the people who are affluent, who are wealthy, that can afford this kind of education. And it has become, and that is a question I've been asking, is that just, what's going on? Aren't we just deepening this social gap that we have? We need, like, it's an emergency that we really bring this bilingual education to public schools, even if it's messy, even if it's not well done. I'd rather start it, because that's how bilingual education started in Brazil, even in the private sector. It started very messy. People didn't know what they were doing. They were trying out stuff. I did that. I was hired at Playpen to take on a new program. They didn't know what it was. They said, look, do it. Just go and do it. And I was just trying and getting a lot of mistakes, just really learning by error. And so it would be better if we just started it, just if some people, and I'm so happy to have Eva on this move, right? Trying to bring this change to the public system. So professional training, yeah, professional training could really grow from having these standards. These references and standards can really guide professional training of teachers, and not just teachers, educators in general, okay? Because we often think of just the teacher, but there's so many other people involved that could, could come up with new professions, new jobs. So opportunities will open for research and development of new practices, materials, and knowledge. And I'd say knowledge for Brazil, for particular sceneries and realities that we live here in Brazil that maybe don't happen anywhere else, that are very particularly ours. So it's very important that we have funding for this research, and we have funding in public universities. I had a lot of trouble joining a master's program at public universities here in São Paulo, because they didn't see bilingual education. It wasn't a thing yet. They didn't really see it as something important, and they didn't see it in the public system yet. So yeah, we need to see that possibility. New jobs with more expertise might be created. So imagine a bilingual education curriculum designer. Imagine a bilingual education special needs instructor. We have known through research that special needs children, they grow a lot in bilingual contexts. They grow more than in a monolingual context. So imagine if we had special needs instructors trained to do this kind of bilingual education for these special needs, right? We don't have these people. We don't. I haven't found any person like that ever in my career in bilingual education. On the contrary, I found many bilingual special needs professionals who think that bilingual education might be a hurdle for those with special needs, right? They sometimes advise parents, look, I know you want bilingual education for your kid, but I mean, right now, not a good idea. Let's just stick to one language, and later, if possible, we'll introduce the next one. And that's not really it. We know from research that that's not the way it happens. So imagine that kind of professional. New courses will certainly be developed at all levels. So undergrad, specialization, graduate school, a master's, PhD level, all kinds of levels. So, and many departments, maybe we would have a department in our universities, a department devoted to bilingual education. Imagine that in a public university, a department of bilingual education. So very important in the professional field. I think that's my message for you today. I wanted to open for questions, but I know you have a very important panel coming up with Roy Lister and Teddy. So I would understand that you want to go there. Absolutely. I won't be offended at all. But if you have any questions that I could maybe
But we can
answer.
Certainly have the questions answered by you. We have the time. We have until 20 past 10.
Oh, great. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will open for questions if anybody wants to. If Jules could mediate by telling me questions.
Gather some questions here. Can you hear me?
Okay. I can.
Okay. Let me go here to our list. Let me just manage all my screens and everything I have here. Okay. If Eva would like to join us,
sure.
Maybe this is a good moment
That'd
for you to interact. And as we have more time, we have 28 minutes.
Wow.
So
perfect.
That's great.
I'm back.
Wonderful.
All right. Thank you for coming back, Eva. I think it was brilliant that Lia managed to see your presentation and dialogue with some of the aspects you mentioned, Eva. So Natalia kindly gathered a few questions that people were typing in our chat on YouTube, and we organized them here on WhatsApp, and here I have them. Katia Castro asked to Eva, is there any project for public schools becoming bilingual or multilingual, as there is a big number of immigrants in Brazil?
Yeah,
something that Lia mentioned as well.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We don't have a national understand or a national portal related to that, because it depends on the local administration. You know, for example, depends on the state, and sometimes depends on the municipal administration. It's impossible to try to drive a national document. We've made one national document, but we just say that all the refugees and immigrants, they should have the opportunity to engage in education, because we have a different interpretation, because we have a national law related to 1950 has says that the immigrants, they don't have necessarily the rights to be engaged with basic education, you know. So because we work together with Justice and Ministério Público and all of these people, we established a new national document saying, no, they have the rights to put their children in our school, in our public school. But specifically related to the question, unfortunately, depends on local administration. There's no other way, because we are a federation. We can impose to local administration, you should have this, you should make that. That doesn't work, unfortunately.
And have you heard about any specific projects coming from mayors or cities or local administrators?
One or two. No. For example, in Rondônia, because they said a lot of immigrants. In Santa Catarina, they received a lot of African people. In Paraná. So we have some place that are struggling with. 1 year ago, they were struggling with this problem. So they try to provide some answers. Here in São Paulo, we have some initiatives related to that, but we don't have in all the other cities that receive refugees, unfortunately. We have some initiatives, São Paulo, Rondônia, Santa Catarina, especially, and Paraná in some cities, but we don't have a national plan for this to address this kind of problem. But again, it should be local, because it's not possible to say from top to down, oh, now you're going to do that. It doesn't work, simply.
Okay. It would be great also if maybe private schools could have any sort of programs to incorporate some of these kids some way, somehow, because they have the structure, they have the program, they have the know-how. As Lia said in the beginning, we were trying and attempting and making mistakes, but after 20 years and research, we came to a point that we know something, right?
Yeah, we do. And I've had this experience because we do have the children of employees. And I've had the opportunity of having kids that came in with really zero English. They had never had contact with the language at all. And it was an unbelievable experience. Nowadays, for example, one of these students, she speaks English and she's learning Korean on her own because she's in love with K-pop. But it is an old dream I have that I would like to take on a more serious program, right? Of really helping. We are wall to wall with a public school, and a public school that's very dear to us. We try to collaborate with them, but of course there's so much bureaucracy. Any kind of initiative we want to make, they have to submit it to the board, and the board has a bunch of worries, concerns. They are always a little wary of us. They think that we're going to come in and sort of impose our culture, and it's just the opposite. We want to embrace theirs and exchange. But we've had very good exchanges with the school, still small ones. And I've had some exchanges with an NGO near the school that is an NGO that serves the community of Real Parque. It's just down the hill from the school. It's called Projeto Casulo. And we have done some work with them. Not necessarily with English itself, because it's this process. We have to go, it's step by step. First, I have to know you, you have to know me. And it's funny how it started with the adults, because when I went there at first to introduce myself and to find ways that we could bridge in something, they were very cautious of me, and it took them a while to really accept me. Now we're great friends, great collaborators, but still it started with the adults and then slowly with the kids, and it's a slow process, but I'm a firm believer that we can do that. It might take a little while, but we need to continue. We just can't give up. That's it.
Thank you. There's another question here. It's not a specific, but I think it suits public and private schools. So that says, what of all the challenges you presented, which one do you think should be tackled or solved first?
Well, I think it's a very interesting question, but we should remind that complex problems, they need more than one approach. We should take the whole thing, because if we say, okay, we have a problem related to teachers training, but it's not just about teachers. We need materials, we need resource, we need a policy to address the whole thing. We need to engage with their parents, for example. We need to provide clear information, and it should not be on the hands of local administration, because every 4 years we have a new administration, fortunately. So we should provide some kind of a structure that could be blind with this kind of situation, because otherwise every 4 years we have to change or start again from zero. And
education is not, it's long term.
Exactly.
It's not like that.
So we have to address problems like policy problems. We have to address teachers training. We have to address national, states, and municipal problems. We are a very complex country because we are a federation, but a very, very different federation, because when we look for our system, for our structure, the municipalities have 11 years in terms of responsibility for basic education, but they have just a minimal amount of money. The state have just 3 years high school, and the federation union have just higher education, and they concentrate all the money, without responsibility. So it's very strange to understand. Even being a Brazilian, I have some difficulty to understand how we come up with this kind of situation where those who have more responsibility have less money, have less condition, have less staff, has less of everything that should have in order to establish, to build the what we have, what we look like, what we desire, which means good education, good opportunity for the majority of our students so they can develop their full capacity. And of course, for a better society, everyone will enjoy that, not just the students and their families, but the whole society. But we make exactly the contrary until now.
And thank you for saying all of that, Tiva, because some people tend to say, I don't like politics. I don't want to be involved. It's not about arguing or having different points of view. It's about your life and whatever happens in your corner, on your street, and in your school and with your neighbor. So yes, we should all be involved. Thanks for teaching us so much, Eva. So Lia, what do you think is it's the most challenging thing that we should, or actually, what should we do first?
I think a big challenge, I don't know if it's the biggest, but it's a big challenge. It's the mindset. And the mindset works not only in bilingual education, it works in education, right? And that has been a big hurdle, because if you have that mindset, it will help everything that Ivan is saying. You know, if you understand education as it is, the power it could give people, it could give a nation, it could give opportunities, you know, it could grow us as a society, then you make it happen. Like I said, really, even with little structure, you start, you know, you're an English teacher, you speak English. Can you speak English? Okay, so you're going to start speaking English in your classroom. That's it. That's it. I'm just going to start speaking English to my kids when I have classes with them. Very well. That's a beginning. That's the first thing you're doing. You're going to be immersed in English during your class. It's a first step. If you have that kind of mindset, it's going to start happening. You know, you're going to drive that change to happen. The thing is, the mindset is not okay. We're always kind of, you know, pushing against that kind of mindset. So for me, that's the big problem.
Okay. There's a question here that relates to the pandemic period that is not finished, but in relation to schools in general and to bilingual education specifically. What do you think is the main legacy this period has given us?
Well, in terms of
both of you,
Brazil experience, I may say that we have good experience, good results about pandemic. One of them is that we have learned a lot. We have learned that we are able to provide solution for many of our problems when we are engaged, when we are working together, when we cooperate. So across the country, we have many initiatives, we have many good examples on how to make it. As Lia said, it's one is better than nothing. Of course, it's not enough, but one is better than nothing. So we can make the change. But I do believe that with this, is not to say that we shouldn't stop to pressure the politicians to make the right policy. I think we should work on both sides. We should make our better, but we should pressure the policy so they have to do what exactly they're supposed to do, making policy. But the other problem is that the pandemic has uncovered how inequality we are in Brazil. Unfortunately, we already know this information, but about 30% of our students stopped to receive education in March. And in some cities, for example, before pandemic, they have no class for 1 year. So now it's 1.5 years without any class. I should say that unfortunately it's in Rondônia, one of the city, because they have to cross the river, because part of the year they are in the water, but there's no boat to cross the river every day. So they have no class for more than 1 year. It was before the pandemic situation. But in many other parts of our country, and we have especially a teacher very, very engaged with this. But look, about 80% of the delivery of class, it was made by WhatsApp. I think this tells us enough about what country we are in terms, about 80% of our class in every country. Sometimes of radio programs, sometimes using TV, sometimes using material, printed material, but 80% of our class in WhatsApp, in one of the 10 richest countries of the world, should make us think about it, what we are doing, you know? And this is not only related to public institutions, this is also related to private sector. It's not only related to public. So I think we have goods and bads. We should balance, but I think we should consider the whole thing, the good ones, so we could continue, especially collaborating. Myself, I have had the opportunity to talk with a teacher in many cities that I have never had this opportunity before. And they are used to say, you should talk with each other, with one city and another, because you have many good things to share with your colleagues. I have said that. And this was marvelous. And including university, we have had many universities trying to engage with basic education, something that we didn't have, unfortunately. So I have seen many good things that it should continue. But again, I think we should address the problems. For example, 30% of our students don't have access to computer and to broadband because our broadband is narrow.
You said 30?
30%.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you, Lia, what do you think is the legacy?
I think a huge legacy of the pandemic for education in general, and I think for people, but in my experience, was this proximity that it brought, right? So we could bring all these difficult situations that we couldn't go to because parents would be afraid or we wouldn't find the person, they wouldn't be available. All of this became possible. So for example, I have a project going on in 8th grade. This is a teacher who really takes on this effort to do more than just teach the language and teach the subject matter. And she has a civil rights project. And we're bringing in a friend of mine who is Brazilian, but has been living in New York for a long time. And he was an activist. He worked in the favelas for many years teaching English. Then he moved to Africa, China, and it has been in New York for many years. And he's a professor at NYU. So somebody with a richness of knowledge, of life experience of these realities from Brazil and elsewhere around the world. And he's going to be talking to my students about civil rights, about Brazil, about New York today, about the movement of Black Lives Matter right now. I mean, a bunch of things, right? How could I have that happen? Before we had a room in the school where we had Skype, we could do a conference call, but it was kind of, I don't know, it felt like we weren't getting enough. We couldn't get all the kids in the frame. The kids were afraid to ask. And now it's so rich, right? These people, they come into our classrooms, they bring this whole reality to us. And so that was very, very rich from the pandemic. Very rich conversations we've had, both for the children and for us adults collaborating as well. But I do see everything that Ivan says, and I think it's a reality that, now is just, we can't deny it. And I think the pandemic has maybe, I'm always hopeful, it has maybe taught us how much this reality, if it continues, it's going to bring us down. And it's not just bringing down the poor, it's bringing us down all together. We are all connected, the whole system needs each other. We can't just say, oh, this person's not so necessary. No, we're all needed, all of us. So maybe that has brought some awareness to some social groups that they need to worry about others. Like you said, Juliana, many people had this idea, oh, I don't like politics. I'm sorry, politics is in your life, whether you want it or not. You can let it do something to you without you having a choice, without you having a voice, or you can make a choice of making it happen the way you would like it to be. But then you need to take an active part, right? And I think that's what we need to do.
And I'm glad we got to hear a bit your concerns and your points of views regarding the pandemic, Eva and Lia, because that's what we're going to deepen about on the last section of our event. Mm-hmm. Stephen Hughes asked, what drawbacks does Lia see these new directives for bilingual education posing for schools, teachers, parents, and students?
So
if you see any.
No, I do. You know why? Because as I said, bilingual education is something messy. Sometimes people, especially in language teaching, and I know this because I've been doing it for a while, there was this thing of creating patterns, right? So you're going to teach. I remember because I started my training at Berlitz, and Berlitz was really like robot training.
Really?
Yes, it was great. My students all learned English. I don't know if they were enjoying it, but they got it. It works. But
I'm a daughter of it.
Oh, you are. So in bilingual education, that doesn't happen. And it's funny how if you change schools, if you go to a different school, a different bilingual school, it's a completely different world. So as much as these directives can try to give you directions, and they will certainly help. I do not want to take away that great value they will have. There is something about the local, which Ivan has mentioned, and that happens for education as a whole. What is cool about education is that it's something that is lively. It just happens right there. It's almost like theater. No wonder I went to theater and then went into education more seriously, because that's the way it works. It's a very live experience. So we can't go there wanting to put things in certain boxes and certain patterns, because it won't work, right? The community I have in my school, super different from the community that another bilingual school has in Mocha. Completely different. You're different people. They want different things. They have different values. So these directives, they have to dialogue with the community you're serving. So that's what I think, Stephanie.
Okay. Thank you, guys. We still have more time. Valeria asked, I'd like to know later on how the speakers view the issue of the qualifications required by the new parecer for teachers working in the bilingual education segment. So whatever they mentioned about pedagogia and letras and the B2, I guess, right? And the courses with more than 100 hours. So what is your view on that?
Well, from my perspective, I should say that I didn't come up with this on my mind because it's my opinion. We work with a lot of people, a lot of specialists. Some of them are here for sure, and most of them are in our country and outside. So we have read a lot of reference. We made lots of conversation with people who has working for all their life related to that topic. So people said you should establish something that is possible to be, of course, reached, but it should motivate people to going forth. So the Minister of Education, for example, has said to me, oh, let's put a C1. I say, no, I wouldn't put that because we have the number. We know how many teachers do we have in Brazil. We know that for the next 10 or 15 years, we will have about 40% of them retiring. We know that number. They are mostly women and they will retire because of our law. So we should provide at least 30% of new teachers if you have if you're interested to continue with this business. So we know that we have concentration so fast, especially in big cities, São Paulo, Rio, etc., etc. So this is not feasible to put it C1. So we use the information that we have, and of course we compare with international parameters. Where we look, for example, in Colombia, in Uruguay, Argentina, in countries that have similar experience that could teach it to us. And we compare Mexico, for example, what they established when they took it. And we agreed, it's not just my opinion, I just put the idea that it seems that everyone or the majority of people agree with that. So that's why how we come up with this B1 and B2 all across this development. It was a common sense, especially from those who sent. About 96 people sent suggestion, and we had a lot of talking with some of them, and some of them suggest this information. That's why we put in this way.
Okay. And you, Lia, what do you think about?
Yeah, that does make sense when you think of the whole country, right? It's funny because I've never asked my teachers for any particular certificate in that sense. I've always assessed them with other criteria, but naturally the quality of the language that they produce, either speaking, writing, reading, makes a big difference in the kind of education that they can provide. But still, I agree with Ivan. I think we need to make it possible. I mean, it's not too far from São Paulo. My brother lives in Jundiaí, and they still don't have a real bilingual school. They have one particular school. It's still growing, But my brother was there, and that was his first remark. Like, the people there, they don't really speak English. They speak like a very poor English. And I was like, my gosh, but Junchai is a huge city. There must be people. You must be in the wrong place. You have to get informed, get aware. And but still, you know, it's very near São Paulo, and they have a lack of professionals in that place. Imagine Rondônia, imagine, right? I can't even imagine. So I agree with Ivan. That's a very wise thing to do, to make it possible, make it that kind. It's exactly what we do in education, right? We create goals that are hard to achieve, but they are achievable, so that people will go there and will try to get there. And I think as we grow and as we get there, then maybe we move on to a C1, but I agree with that, I do.
There's another question here regarding bilingual programs. How are they going to work after the diretrizes? Are they going to be bilingual schools, school with extended bilingual English lessons or something else? So if you could talk about it. This is, I think it's one of the main targets to organize the system, because from what I have seen, Lia's nodding, maybe she agrees with me, it's something she had said during her presentation. Any schools who has assigned bilingual school, bilingual education, all of a sudden has become a bilingual school. So what do these people have to do now?
Yeah.
Well, they have to see, in my perspective, or after this, the document be agreed with Minister of Education, they say, yes, they read the document now. We're going to see a changing movement. There's no other way to make the right things right, you know, because unfortunately, many schools who says they're bilingual, they provide bilingual education, it isn't true, because some of them, we know, they just deliver 1 or 2 hours of English lesson or other language lesson. It's not a bilingual education, you know. So after this document, it wasn't be possible, because local council, local board, they will take the document and they will establish some between, according to the possibilities, but they couldn't say, oh, you won't follow this because this is a national document, they should obey. They could put something more, you know, but they can't say, oh, we won't put this, for example, because this is too hard. We instead of B1 or C1, we put nothing. They couldn't do that. So every school should obey the law. You know, the normalization, what we call a national framework related to bilingual education, if they are approved by Minister of Education, they exactly the same as other documents related to that. It's a norm, so you should obey. You should use it in order to be your credentials approved when you're appeal for that. So every school, every legal school has to approve their particular segment of education. So it wasn't be possible to say, oh, I'm a bilingual education. Okay, who says that? Myself. No, you should to prove that in fact you are providing bilingual education, what methodology are you using, what is your pedagogic conception, what are you making? So the whole community, the family could see and compare, oh yes, in fact you're an apple tree, so you provide apples, oh not orange, yeah, exactly. So it wasn't be so easy as we have now, because we don't have a law that says you can't. And in our system, we have a positive justice. If the law says nothing, you can. After the law says this and that, you can't. This is our system. Our law is a positive law. So if the law says nothing until now, because we don't have in our LDB nothing about bilingual education, we don't have a national arrangement, a national framework related to that. But once we have, it's impossible to say, oh, I will forget it, I'm not interested in that, because we suffer consequence of that.
The rules were clear, you play the game. Or not.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
But no one, I have said, no one is obliged to say, oh, I'm going to deliver bilingual education. It's not obliged. You could make in different ways, but you should be honest with your audience.
Yeah, what I think is that the audience doesn't even know what is it, you know? So
they're paying for something they don't know.
Many parents, they just really believe that they're getting their kids to learn that language. They don't know what this whole structure means, what exactly they're getting out of bilingual, like opting for bilingual education. They don't know what that means. They're still worried about getting into college abroad or whatever dreams they have, but they don't get it. And that's our fault. We need to make this spread out. They need to be informed about it, because aren't we fooled in the supermarket? Don't people just put eco this, natural that? Aren't we fooled with so many beautiful names? And then we end up buying because we think those clothes were made with natural fibers. The natural is the key word for me because I'm super environmentally correct. The same thing happens in education. So we need to inform people well. There is another side that we live as bilingual schools, which is this national framework, let's say, Ivan, because the people who sort of supervise our work legally, right? Delegacia de Ensino, they know nothing about it. They have no clue what bilingual education is, and they couldn't care less. So they are trying to fit us in a box. So we need to obey the rule. That's exactly the way you said. It's a positive law. So whatever's not said, you can do, but also whatever is said, you cannot do. So you're not going to do this. You cannot have the teacher do that. So we end up having to create like twist situations and pretend we're doing this, but we're doing that, so that we can do what we're doing. And we're doing a very good job. And we have to pretend we're not. That's what's happening. So I would like to see these people who are there on the floor checking the schools, these people have to be trained. They have to know who they're working with and what they're working for. These people are very badly trained. They're very bureaucratic. They're not pro-education, period, not bilingual.
I have a good news related to that. May I say?
You do? Oh, great. Super.
Yeah, we are just waiting for the approval of minister. After that, we are working, and of course, if you're interested to help us, we will love it, because we will plan a lot of discussion, national discussion related to local administration, exactly to avoid what you have said, Lia. This kind of problem that we have heard a lot of. So in fact, we are engaged with a local councillor because we have a national agreement. So every 2 or 3 months, we have a meeting related to that. And I have talked about this, but of course, I can't put so much enforcement because we have to wait until the final decision related to Minister of Education. But after that, we're going to work hardly in order to say, okay, if you have the power to make the arrangement to say yes or no, you should also have the knowledge to understand what you're talking about, and not just to say yes or no and just to be like a blind. No, it's more than that. This background or this framework is a part of our education. So we still have LDB, we still have other, other conception and other rights, especially related to a school. They have all the rights that LDB says they have. So what we are talking, what we are trying to establish, it's a new understanding about what we have in people. Everyone say, no, we are bilingual education. No, after this document, after this document, you should see if, in fact, if really you are interested to deliver bilingual education to your students. If you are really interested, these are the framework that they should obey. So we are organizing to provide large seminars all over the country related to border, because I have a local counselor in about 80 or 85% of our cities. So it's easy to provide 3 or 4 or 10 meetings so we can cover the majority of our city, because in fact, this city is not about states, it's about city. So you should make the conversation with the local administration. And we are trying to organize, and every help is, of course, lovely, and we have a lot. If you're interested to help us, you should, of course.
I would love to. I would love to. Very happy to hear.
One more thing for our to-do list. Okay, we're 20 past 10. We have the Diane Tedic and Lyle and Roy Lister's event, the CBLT event. I know that some of our participants are also going to participate from that event, and you have to log in and you have to get in there. So we want to be polite and not to glitch, to crash with their event. So we're going to give you this pair time to get in there. But we'd like to spend 9 more minutes here with you guys, and if you'd like to stay for questions. So this is a moment where we we thank Lia and Eva, and we say goodbye for the participants of the CBLT event. But we can ask 1 or 2 more questions for the people who would like to stay here with us. All right. So my next question is from Lyle French, who's hosting the neighbor event. What can the private school sector can do to help the public schools in terms of implementing the policies, especially bilingual and multilingual programs? Leah mentioned a bit, right? Some programs you do.
I think they can share the knowledge and the experience. As Lia says, train the mindset is not just about my students, you know, my particular audience. If you're interested to share your knowledge, your experience, your material, there's a lot of people very excited to receive your help and your aid. I think it's simple like this.
Yes, me too. Yeah, that's the same way. And I would love to be one of those people. I would love to share. I just find a lot of obstacles to get close to them. But if there were this possibility, this opening, I would love to share. I would love to go there and help people do it their own way, like help them understand what I do, but also find ways so they could kind of mold it into the way that would fit their own needs. So yeah, I think we need to get organized. Maybe that's what we need, right? I think the directives maybe can help us in that sense, right?
I missed a very important information to say. I don't know if the people laughed already, but is that the link will be opened. They just get back. They don't even have to close the window. It's the same link for the third part of our event. One last question from Terry Aranda for Eva. Do you know if universities are already planning changes in the undergraduate programs to include bilingual education in the curriculum? Very important question. Thank you, Terry.
I hope. I hope. I mean, University of São Paulo, I hope. We made this recommendation explicitly in our document to Minister of Education because they have the power, they have the policy to motivate a university, especially federal university, you know. But of course, they have the power, they have the program, they have the money to motivate all the universities who has this kind of licentiate. It's possible. I hope so. It's not easy because we know that university usually it's like a big ship, so to turn to left or right it takes a long time. Sometimes we don't have this time, so I think we should be quickly because that's the time. But I do hope that we can make the changing in order to help to improve our education. I do hope, and I'm working for that in my university especially.
Yeah, if I can say something, I think something that the pandemic has taught us is that this kind of fast change, we can make it. Yeah, we just don't make it happen because we keep putting all these obstacles. You see how much change we have had to make, and we made it. So I think we need to think about that from now on.
It was a pleasure having you both here. I think I have a few other questions here, but they're very similar to what we have seen so far. I love the way you interacted, and as we managed to face each other's different realities, but also to complement each other's. Thank you so much for participating. It's been a pleasure to introduce and to host this part of the event. So we're gonna have a little break until 11:30. And we're gonna get back with the final part of our event. Thank you so much once more, Lia and Eva.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a
Have
pleasure.
a great day.
Great presentation.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eva, for the work you do. Very appreciated.
I think with a lot of people like you, so it was a team working.
Yes, yes. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Ju. Thank you very much.
começar, tá?
In English or in Portuguese?
And we're live on YouTube with the video feed. And we'll soon start our second half of.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Sherina.
Hello.
Hi, girls, I'm panicking here because my camera keeps crashing. So if it does crash, just, I don't know what to do. I'll try and switch computers or I don't know, but let's
It's
see.
fine. It's fine. We can see you here on Zoom, and everyone can see you on YouTube too.
Okay, let me, I will have PowerPoint to share. Can I share screen and leave, or shall I send it to you by email, or when we need it, I'll just share screen? What do you think?
Yes, you can share when you need it. Whenever you want to start, you can share, okay? Everybody on YouTube can see us and hear us, okay? So, and as soon as you'd like to start, I think Bianca is going to introduce you.
I also have a dog who has no idea and no respect for the people who live here, you know?
I have cats, so I know what that's like.
No, my dog, you know, the minute I go into a meeting and she decides it's time to start barking, you know?
I believe everyone is very, let's say, used to that right now. So no worries, you know, children coming to camera, dogs bark, and, you know, all these things. Let me
Part of the new normal.
Yeah. The other day we had an adorable event, a geography teacher, middle school. He was teaching geography, and a little girl, his little daughter, barges into the room because her tooth fell out and she wanted to show Daddy and all his students the tooth. And so she basically took over his lesson, you know? And he let it happen, and the students were happy, and there was a lot of interaction going on.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's why I think this conversation we're having now is so important. So people feel they are part of a system and they're not by themselves having, you know, trouble and trying to adjust and, you know, finding ways. So like that, things like you have to improvise because, you know, technology didn't work, or, you know, I've heard of, my boss told me something about it. He was having this very big presentation to a country, a national Ministry of Education. and he was taking care of, he was babysitting or dog sitting this little dog. And just when he started talking about something very important, this dog comes into the room, and, you know, it starts like just going all around, and he was like trying to, you know, just put it down. I mean, you know, things like that will happen. It's not a safe environment, as you were saying. I mean, you cannot, but it's okay. I'm just gonna wait for another 3 minutes because, you know.
Live on YouTube, apparently.
We are.
That's okay.
It's okay, yeah. It's part, well, this is supposed to be an open conversation, so I guess.
So it's already open.
Yeah.
Open, exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting, the conversation with TEDx and Lister, yeah?
Yep. I like very much how they're researchers, right? So I always like when I listen to researchers talk. I mean, it's based on research. What can we say? So of course we have several ways of approaching the same subject, and they're just very trusted and very active people in the area. So yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, and Selma, I loved your question about how do teachers become that, achieve that level of proficiency. I mean, you know, we have so many so-called bilingual schools emerging, and you just can't bring in or expect to have native speakers in every single classroom. It's not even, in my opinion, in some cases, it's not really culturally healthy, you know? But yes, there has to be proficiency, and how do we get the teachers there? You know, I think it was a lovely question.
Yeah, I'm concerned with this, Sherina. You know, as we grow as a bilingual education community, we will need more and more qualified teachers who know about bilingual education and who are also proficient. And developing a language doesn't happen overnight. So we need a plan.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think we need to help teachers get there. The teachers deserve this, yeah? They really do deserve this network to help them get there.
Yeah. We're gonna get there together as a community, hopefully.
So,
yes.
So.
I think that the directrices come in a way to, it will help that happen in a way as it states a certain minimum, you know, and so when you know where you want to get, you know, the target, you know, the goal, it's easier for you to get there, you know. So of course, there was a question, a very important question in the morning to Ivan mentioning, asking, I don't know who did it, but asking if the universities were getting prepared for that, you know. And I think when you have the need, and so you have money, because, you know, people will be paying for that. Who is going to pay? We don't know. If it's the state, if it's the school, if it's the teacher, we don't know that. But someone is going to pay for that, or, you know, or if it's us, you know, the state in terms of the state universities or the national universities. Then I believe that, you know, that when you need, you have the need, you have the offer, and they come together. It's economically proven and also logistically proven. So I don't know, having a target, do we agree or we don't, or I mean, it doesn't matter, but it's something that will at least lead the way to where we want to get.
Yeah, I think it sets the minimum bar, yeah, that, you know, below this is not acceptable. And then from there on, we can move on. And then I think probably it leaves enough wiggle room for schools to work with it. but you know, as you say, we have the minimum, and that's what we have to deliver. At least most schools, you know, there's no.
Okay, it's 11:32. Time goes fast when we're having a good chat.
Absolutely.
So, well, let me start this part of our event. I never know what the name for that, but our morning talking about bilingual education. I hope many people were able to see Diane Tedek and Roy Lister, and now you're back. Let's see. I don't have my YouTube open, so I don't know. Well, I'm very happy to be here and in seeing so many teachers in these presentations since 8:30 in the morning. So it's 3 hours now. It's really nice because I do believe it's my statement for life that I believe education is the only way we have to change realities. And it's not politics, but then again, as our presenters mentioned or reminded us in the morning, politics they're like calories. It doesn't matter if you like them, if you care for them, they're there and you're gonna take it. So it goes through via politics, but actually education is what changes lives and what changes realities. So of course, now we're going through a very different reality. And that's why I'm here today with Rita Ladeia. I'm going to say, I'm going to just read it down. Rita holds a BA in English Language and Literature and an MA in Applied Linguistics from the State University of Campinas in the area of teaching and learning languages. Rita has worked as an EFL teacher, academic coordinator, course designer, and teacher developer for several language institutes and secondary schools in São Paulo. And now she works as a consultant and academic advisor for bilingual schools all over Brazil. I'm also here with Sherina. Sherina has an MBA in educational management and degree in education and business administration. And she has been working in bilingual schools for 24 years as a teacher coordinator and teacher trainer. She has presented papers and published articles with ASA, the Association of American Schools in South America. And Selma, who's a teacher in several post-graduation courses aimed for teachers in multilingual settings, as well as in an international school principal, consultant, and author in bilingual education field. She holds an M.Ed in education and postgraduated in languages of arts and a BA in education from the University of São Paulo. She has been the editor of Educação Bilingual for over 10 years. So this is just a bit to introduce the big team I have here, the heavyweight team I have here to talk about the near future of bilingual education. Well, the pandemics have changed the way we relate to any area of our lives, right? It's naive to say education has not changed education, or even worse, to say that it has only changed education. So we know the ways of teaching and learning have changed, but now we're talking about over 200 days that we are going through this new reality. Well, I don't agree with the new normal. I deny that. So it's just a current situation. In this current situation, we are over 200 days working on it. So I would like to know from you guys, which stages did the schools went through, meaning since this reality is new, I would guess that you had to change paths or resources or pedagogy over time. Can you tell us a little bit about that, how it worked with you? And I don't know, I didn't choose anyone to start, but if you Sherina, Rita?
Yeah, I can start. I think something interesting Lia said early this morning is that this pandemic, whether we like it or not, has brought us all together, this proximity. And I think the idea of school has changed. It's what we thought of school, where the school physically had an address, it had a street name, it had a classroom. Middle of March, all this disappeared. And the concept of school, we all had to look at this difference, and everybody came together to really bring the two main players together, the teacher and the student, and literally everybody, publishers, editors, team leaders, everybody was there, families, IT, platforms, to make sure that these two players did not lose any kind of connection. I think this was the most beautiful thing that has happened. It was a great gain, and it really showed that is what school is, the teacher and the student, and to make sure that we guarantee that the student growth, as much as possible, when possible, is not interrupted. So yes, at the beginning there was this grappling to get everybody online. We know teachers don't like sitting down. We like to have our hands on the kids. We like to look over shoulders, you know, the scratch on the head, the tap on the back, and suddenly this was all gone, you know, and you know, teachers want to dive into the and say, you know, are you there? Are you okay? And so yes, practices had to change, but I think without negotiating with the school principals, with the school values, with educational values, those were non-negotiable. Other things, yes, had to be negotiable, but the core principles were not negotiable. Selma, Rita, what your experiences, what's been happening?
Yeah, I think for those schools that were already using and integrating some kind of technology, the challenge was not that big. Of course it was big, but not as big as if they haven't had the opportunity to bring technology into the classroom. So several schools, even public schools, had students that already were familiar with Google Classroom, for instance, or YouTube or WhatsApp. And the teachers were incredibly creative into bringing those technologies that the students already knew in new ways, innovative ways, tweaking what they were designed to do and integrating them in their lessons. I think this was a good point. The downside, I think, I believe that to some extent we could keep the academic development of students because that's the easy thing to do, like to deliver from a distance. The social part and the physical part was the hardest one because the school is not only about learning content, but it's also about interacting, integrating, sharing, negotiating, building, work grouping, all the soft skills that we talk about. And also physically, I think it really took a toll of all of us teachers. Lots of us put on some weight. And students as well, because like they're not able to move. We have students who are locked in an apartment. And in the beginning, they couldn't even go to the common areas, couldn't play on the streets, couldn't see each other. So this was the tough part. So I'm thinking that when we're back to face-to-face learning, this should be a priority. Like the movement, the body, and the social emotional side should be prioritized over any content or any academic aspect of curriculum. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree, Selma, because I think a lot of families are worried. Have we lost content? What are my kids losing? Have they lost the content on this unit on math? And I think it is much bigger than that because the content we can catch up with a lot of things I don't think we have lost. Not maybe in subtle ways, but not deep-rooted learning. But the social part, I think we need to take care of.
Yes, I agree, Sherina.
I agree with both of you. And what I would say is that we began with so many questions, and some of our teachers and some of us who have also been like helping teachers, training and developing teachers, most of us had to look for ways to start. And then as the days went by, as the months went by, we became much more familiar with technology. But I believe that the most important gain, and of course there were gains and there were losses in all the areas, it wouldn't be different concerning education. I believe that the most important gain was that I've never seen families and teachers working so close together. I've never seen schools, families and teachers planning together, and like the teachers being so concerned about informing the families how they could cooperate. And I think that we all learned, we all developed. Another very important gain was that, well, we all as Brazilian schools have to follow BNCC. And in the general competences of BNCC, there is one that specifically asks us to take care and to develop digital literacy. Yeah. And this had not been really considered as something very important for many teachers and for many schools. And I believe that we've really advanced, we really grew a lot in our own digital literacy, and also in helping our students and families develop digital literacy as well. So as Selma mentioned, and also you, Sherina, the losses probably were, the most important losses were really related to the social interaction that life provides us with, and that we lost in all places, not only in school, but the kids stopped going out, traveling, going to the playground. They stopped everything. And I believe that this is something hard to recover. And as Selma mentions, this should be a priority as soon as we go back to some sort of new school. Next year, let's hope we can begin going back to school in a more natural way. And I believe that working with their wellness is a priority to content. Content, they have their whole life to recover, and the school is not the only source of content, but life can provide them with good content. I believe that working on their wellness should be our priority when we go back.
Let me ask you, you all mentioned the families, and well, we are almost living in a Schitt's Creek environment. You know, I had to mention the Emmy, families that sometimes didn't even know that many information about the school and about the children. Now they're living in Schitt's Creek, they're living in a motel room. We are living in apartments like, you know, Selma mentioned and all. So I know in the beginning that was very difficult to show parents so in terms of language acquisition, or as you mentioned, content areas, how it was being supported and all. So I would like you guys to talk a little bit about both. How did families take that part? Was it easy? And also, how did you change? So going back a little bit to my first question, how was that change, that switch from the classroom to the digital or to the online meetings? How did you guys manage to put all of this together, you know, in a way that it was peaceful and useful to all of the students, which are in the end our main target, right? To get students well. So
shall I start?
Too long?
No, that's fine. I think what worked really well in our school right from the very beginning, we had a very open channel of dialogue, very honest dialogue with the families, no false promises on the table, making it very clear step by step what we could deliver at that specific point. Because as the pandemic developed, you couldn't just stay at the same starting point, which was in March. Because remember, in March, we closed down the school and we thought, okay, we'll all be back in a couple of weeks. It's easy. Yeah, that was so easy. So we promised what we could for March. But then we realized we would have to make adjustments for April, for May, June, July, August, second semester. And I think honest dialogue with the families has been crucial, totally crucial. What we can do, what we can't do, what we want to do. And this has really been, it has worked, you know. Sometimes it hasn't been welcomed, but I think the reality is always better than making a promise that we can't keep.
Yeah, expectations, right? I mean, setting the right expectations so you don't get,
To avoid frustrations on behalf of all stakeholders. You can't do that. You know, we're all in very delicate situations. So what you cannot do is impose frustration. Not right now.
Because both students, teachers are of course exposed to the families now, but also the students. I mean, they are with their families like there, I mean, you know, side by side. Selma, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I felt in my experience that parents had to learn more about the way the school operates, the methodology that the school uses. And it's really hard for parents sometimes because their expectation and their experience as a students is very traditional. And many schools don't do what the schools used to do 30, 40 years ago. Gladly,
yeah.
That's great. But they don't know that. Even when they choose a school based on more innovative, more contemporary approaches to learning, and when they see the lessons happening on Zoom or Meet or any other resource, they get really surprised to see that the teacher is not teaching, like it's not top down, but it's developed from the bottom. And students have a lot of action and a lot of agency into doing things. And the way we address mistakes or like the things that students don't know yet is totally different from the correction they are used to doing. So in my experience, this was big initially during the pandemic times. When we realized that we would keep going and going and going, as Sherina said, we had to create some strategies to help parents to understand what they chose when they chose that school. So talking about the curriculum, talking about innovative learning, talking about bringing some science into parents' life, like this is the best way we learn nowadays. This is what we know about education. So we felt that there was a kind of cooperation, initially a little bit of a trick between the parents and the family, and then some dialogue, and then building cooperation. And now I feel that most of the parents have understood and they really bought into the school's methodology. So this is a bad thing in the beginning that turned into being something good. And I feel that the parents developed their own agency. And now I don't see education as like teacher and student. I see it as a tripod with teachers and students and the families.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, Selma. I think that the families really learned a lot. And I also realized that the teachers had to really think about the activities that they choose in terms of the principles behind the activities, because they had to share those principles. And for us, sometimes when we choose something that is kind of hands-on or that is supposed to be developing fine motor skills, for example, we know what we are doing and we just include that activity in our plan without really thinking about how to explain the reasons why those activities have been chosen. And now the families needed to know. And I think that one of the most important things that the families discovered is that early childhood education is not all about playing. Absolutely. That there is so much behind that. There's so much that we do in the school. And I believe that the families really, really learned a lot about what goes on in the school and how things work. In my experience, when we found a way of having the teachers explain to the families the reasons behind their choices, their pedagogical choices, then we started having like less complaints, and we really built a very solid and very positive relationship with the families. And I believe that that was the starting point of the success, when the families started being really partners of the teachers and the schools. And when they started asking for explanation instead of criticizing the proposals. So that for me was really the turning point to what we could do later and make this remote learning much more successful, either synchronous or asynchronous. Parents learned how to like prepare the environment and let the kids go. And the teachers also overcame their fears of being exposed. So I think that was really for all of us like a turning point. And now I really see it as a point of no return. I believe that from now on, we are definitely going to have some kind of blinded that we don't know how it's going to be or how it's going to work, but we cannot just throw away everything that we've learned. I think this is really going to mean a lot in our education, and of course bilingual education from now to the near future.
I have two questions here. So one is from Terry, and she's asking Selma that, well, you touched upon a key aspect, the role place of errors and how to go about them. This is big in education. Some families see school as a place for correction only. Can you talk more about that? I think Selma would talk a little bit, and perhaps Sherina, you would like to show perhaps how you did in practice later. So please, Selma.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Bianca. And thank you, Terry, for the question. It's really something that really interests me to think about assessment, holistic assessment, integrating formative assessment, in assessment as learning, those things. So I have a funny story to tell you about this. So think about you teaching, you're a teacher for preschool students, and you're like doing your lesson with the storytelling and a song, and the family doesn't speak any English. They have very basic level of English. So they don't really get the instructions. The child does, because the teacher is doing exactly the same structure the child was used to doing when we were face to face. So the child is doing really well. The mother doesn't know how to help. The father or whoever is around the house doesn't know how to help, but they support the child. And then it's really funny because like there's song, there's story, there's interaction, and then 15 minutes later it's over. And some parents went online to research the songs, learn the songs, sing the songs with the students, went to the links we gave for storytelling, because we had teachers storytelling and we sent in the videos. And we also had videos that are ready everywhere, like in platforms that we were using. So I felt that one thing that was really amazing is that the parents started focusing more on the process, because they also didn't know. The children knew more than the parents. So this was a good thing. It turns the idea of error upside down. And we also have a different situation. Sometimes parents do know English, and we also had that. And the students are making mistakes, and I could see and listen to the mother say, given the right answer, because she doesn't know how to deal with the mistake the child would have done. And it's really funny because sometimes you see the child say, stop, mommy, or be quiet, mommy, things like this. And it was really funny. So of course, we would discuss later. We had lots of help desks for parents. So if they had questions, they could go in the end of the day and the teacher would talk to them about what happened. So I saw a lot of learning, and I think I can't be too optimistic that everybody sees errors as part of the process, as teachers do or should do. But I felt that parents with a very strong concern about making mistakes, children make mistakes, they tone it down a little. And I hope that they will see that learning involves risk, and we don't know. If we don't know, we might make mistakes, and that's fine. So I think that's a good side that I saw, but it's not done yet. I think that's something we here as teachers should focus more on. We also are guilty of focusing more on what they can't do instead of what they can. So we have to change the culture.
So should we address that with parents, like in a parents development program, something like that? Rather, of course, some parents will get just the role model, you know, like role playing with the teachers, because they will see how teachers do. That's what I do, at least. And but perhaps just addressing more closely. Sherina?
Yeah, I think, like what Selma's saying, you know, as our teachers are teaching their social sciences or whatever, or language, and you have parents sending us messages saying, where's the grammar? Where's the grammar? You know, where's the grammar? Where's the past perfect? And, you know, but, you know, again, going back to the honest dialogue, and going back to what Selma's saying, understanding the process of the pedagogy and the structures, and helping everyone understand. At the beginning, yes, we were worried about assessment, because I think one of the things about remote learning, it gives teachers and administrators a very false sense of security, that you can go at the speed you want, you can do what you want, because you don't have the immediate reaction of notebooks, of hand raising, of questions, of the quizzical facial expressions, and like depending on the division for the older kids, you know, teachers were bombarding, saying, wow, this is great, I can go faster than in the classroom. And then suddenly, no, we can't. We have to slow down, and we have to use frequent, we have to take temperatures frequently. You know, like when you've got a child with a fever at home and you take the regular fever checks, it was the same thing. And we had to create ways to measure the output, so we could really understand, especially with the language, what were the children receiving, so that we could adjust what we would construct if we had to make changes to our curriculum expectations. We started doing some very initial testing in our school with the older kids. We used the TOEFL exam, TOEFL Junior, TOEFL ITP. So we applied the mock test, and initial readings have been okay. Our high school kids, learning has been intact. We are fine. But of course, they're older, you know, learning is consolidated, they're on their way leaving school. Then we had to think of other ways and other tools that teachers could use to create collaborative work, to bring out to show the output. And again, initial readings showed that we are practically where we were last year. So we're quite happy with that. You know, it's good news, but I think again, it's we were fine delivering the input, and then we had to start thinking, what about the output? We don't have enough time for children to talk online, so we had to shift to reading, to video presentations where kids would do oral presentations, send it to us. And so there had to be shifts in formative assessment. There's no way, and I hope that these shifts do remain with us post-pandemic, because they've been super positive. And if you would like, I would love to share with the audience.
Please do.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Can I share my screen?
Yeah, you can. Let me know if you have any trouble, but it should be fine. There we go.
What can you?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so basically, what did our school do? We decided the school really invested in platforms, because
just 1 second. If you can open, just have a full screen for that. I don't know where you could, perhaps. There we go. Now I can see it.
So if you think about parents would come into school, they would look at the collective murals and basically understand what was happening in the classroom, and remote learning took all of that away. Word walls had to take on a different form, and so we took on Padlets so that teachers could
find a way for kids to send back their work so we could measure what was going on. So this is a project on animals, first grade. So this, even though it's in English, it serves as a formative assessment for both the Portuguese and the English teacher. It doesn't really matter the language, because you have the writing, you have the images, and we can see that the child has actually developed, that they're writing the way they use the space. So this has been really, really nice. Let me go to the next one. Look at this, students in grade 1 using the chat to practice their rhyming. And obviously some little child loves French fries. Look at that. Okay, so using the chat has been wonderful. May I go on? Okay, an interesting project in grade 2 is asking the teacher how they learn. How are the kids learning? What are they learning? And here we have feedback.
I would like to, just the one before, that was another question I had. So do you think, and if we can stay just freeze here a little, do you think that the way teachers now face planning is different? Do you think this is one of the gains, or no, it was just overwhelming for teachers and this should go back?
No, I think now the planning has to be far, far more intentional and far more efficient, because we don't have the time that we did in the classroom. So there are many expectations that we do keep, but then we have to find more efficient ways of making it happen and getting the output back to us quickly. Remember the temperature, so you have the feedback loop. So we needed the information back quickly enough to make adjustments for the next lessons, for mini lessons, for language adjustments. And I think this was one of the changes that took place. Yeah, did that answer your question?
Selma, Rita, yeah, that was my question. I don't know if you guys saw anything different. I think it was very complete, but just to check if.
I think if you get through the other slides, other things might come up.
Okay,
yeah?
Very good.
So basically, here we have an image from a child who's telling us what she's learning. She's obviously doing remote learning about the sun. And you can see how maybe in the past, a child would have drawn him or herself sitting down at a desk. And look at how interesting, the child is not in an environment anymore. She's standing up. And this computer, I think the way they're drawing, how they see themselves in learning has changed. And this was very interesting class conversation with the students and with the teacher. So it's not only getting the feedback on language and content, but getting feedback on how the children now feel with this remote learning. Okay, this is grade 3. Talking about food, and as you can see, the little ones love the images, they love the color, and here with this little bit of language, with the little ones, we don't really need that much language to see where we need to focus on for our mini lessons. So a couple of sentences for the little ones is quite enough to take us towards our expectations. Okay, so if you look at here, I like to eat with my family. So this would be a mini lesson on homophones, perhaps. KWL charts that would be all over the classroom walls. We had to bring them back, but where? Again, using collaborative platforms. We use Padlet and we use Nearpod. Okay, so here they're learning about different countries. I think I've got okay. Grade 6, talking about, again, this was trying to bring the kids together about social issues, like going to the dentist, because like now as kids are at home, they seem to be going to the dentist, and so kids are talking about this, and so it's one way of bringing kids together, not talking only about academics, but talking about other stuff. And again, here there's more. So if you look at this is grade 6, this is very much comparable to what we had last year. Not much difference with the output, which was very good news.
Oh, I would like to mention, because I didn't, I think in the beginning, but you do not coordinate a bilingual school per se, school, right?
We have an extended English program. It's not bilingual and it's not international. And, you know, as you can see, we're still getting very good results. Okay. This is grade 8. Okay, so bringing music into their world and discovering music in New York. And again, comparing the language to the language output to what we had last year. Again, very much on par, very much on par.
Do you have information as well on how much kids liked doing this kind of activities or, you know, lessons?
They actually, Bianca, they actually enjoyed it. They enjoyed it quite a lot because they had to do it in groups, even though they're all in their individuals' homes. They had to find ways to meet, to come up with their collaborative Padlets. Okay, so if you look at this one with STEAM, this is a group 5, because we had huge problems trying to think what to do with STEAM, which is totally hands-on in the lab. So teachers had to find a way to get the kids together to come up with solutions. And I think this is one of the great things that happened in the pandemic. Teachers are used to working out of their comfort zone. And we had children telling teachers, give us more, we're brave, we can do this. If we don't know, we can work this out together. And this was amazing. So here we have STEAM, where she's working with pulling machines apart to look at what parts make a machine work. We have the academic language. Okay, so here we go. Isn't that cool? Yeah. So she found an old phone, and she's actually found, or he has actually found the keywords. And this is with the upper grades in, I think this is grade 9, where they decided to work on accessible cities. And again, the language output is totally on par in grade 9 with what we had last year. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, may I?
Yeah. I would like to have, well, actually, I think we can put together as well. We have already talked a little bit about the gains and the legacy of the pandemics of this time, you know, with this kind of. So can we expand a little? Now we saw these examples. Can you guys talk a little bit about what you expect? Because, you know, what we know, 2020 taught us one thing: we never know what's going to happen. So. From your experience, and now that you've been going through all of this, what do you think it will be the main legacy of all this struggle we had to go through?
Definitely, technology learning was huge. And definitely, we are going to take all those resources in the future, even if we are everyday face-to-face, we are going to make better use of those resources. We have teachers who became video editors, amazing storytellers. We found talents that we didn't know we had. We have now students and teachers who are YouTubers, and they have channels and they follow each other, and we can follow them as well. I don't think we're going to go back in any of those things. I hope I don't know if it's going to happen, but I hope the schools will focus much more on social, emotional, physical development. And of course, we will do the academic side as well, but that's not going to be the main thing. I think well-being will be in our minds for quite a while now, because we need to support each other. Many people had personal losses, and we have to be there for them. And I think the fear that the students are experiencing, that we are, and the teacher, and the students even more than us, like the anxiety, the fear is going to be there. So we have to think about this generation, what impact this is going to have in the long term. And I think everybody who's working with psychology or emotional support, we have a lot of work to do. I hope we are learning how to be more cooperative and solidary and support each other doing this.
While we wait for the other two to have a word as well, I would like to request or invite the audience to think about some questions. We'll have around 10 minutes in the end, so we can, if you have questions that we haven't touched, please do through the chat. Please, girls.
Well, I think we've had a wonderful chance to reflect on how behavior, memory, and learning go together. And we started working on behavior, on helping students learn how to learn through technology, because like from my personal experience, and I'm talking about teenagers, they do wonderfully concerning technology, but learning and having classes was not a strong point, not here, right? So they really had to discover other things that they can do using technology for their own learning. And the teachers also, when the teachers started being more interesting in their classes, then the students started learning more. But anyway, we all starting from learning behavior, right? And then when we had this more positive interaction with the students through the internet, then memory and learning started being better activated. And I believe that Sherina's examples were wonderful, and probably most before having all those practices, we all went through the same challenges of having them get engaged and learning how to engage them. And as Selma mentioned, we have already overcome the difficulty of being exposed to the internet, stop wishing the protection of the walls of the classroom, because many of us would only teach with the classroom door closed. And now we are on the internet and editing videos and performing like characters when storytelling, and we've been doing so many other different things. So this is something that came and will be in our lives forever as teachers. So again, I go to the point that I mentioned before and that Selma has just mentioned again. Now taking care of those kids when we come back is our most important challenge. The school for many years, in fact for centuries, has been seen as the only source of information, and now we know that we're just a small source of information, that the kids can access content through so many other medias. They don't need the school only to access content. So taking care of them and working on their wellness in our own, this is going to be like probably the most important thing for us to do now. And when we go back to having some kind of face-to-face interaction again.
Eduardo mentions here that it's really a paradigm shift, and it is. I mean, it had happened to the working space before, where bosses now are facilitators, and I think schools now, as you mentioned, became a big facilitator to actually put the content into a path, but not actually to decide what's important or not to learn. So, and Sherina, would you like to add something?
Yes, I think well-being, I think not only of the students, but the whole community, the school community, the teachers, the admin, technology, the ladies who come, security staff, there is a whole ecosystem that goes around the school that will need to be taken care of. So, and this, or within this ecosystem, you have also the student who is at the center, that is the protagonist. And so if you have a healthy ecosystem, I think everyone, all stakeholders will flourish. And that's what my heart is really, really aiming for as soon as we go back to school. We want a healthy ecosystem back in our educational system.
Yeah. That's very important. The pandemics and this time online spotlighted some other stakeholders that were kind of relaxed and, because they were not showing. But now, as you said, the technology guy now is a big person in the school. And what about the librarians? How do they work now? I mean, what's their job now? So they had to also reinvent all this. By the way, did you guys have any good experience with the library or, Learning Common, or however it's called in the schools, and how it integrated all this digital learning?
Yeah, with our school, we ended up we used your scholastic books, showing and bringing them close and then eventually moving on gradually to platforms. But it's, again, reminding that there was somebody else at the other end who needed to see those images. So this was also a mind shift in how you deliver a reading class,
And more specifically, a guided reading class, right? I mean,
the guided reading class suddenly had to go into breakout rooms because at the beginning of the pandemic, in a way, we started delivering equal classes and then gradually moving towards equity using our breakout rooms. And, we are beginning to bring in the guided reading, but that hasn't been easy.
Yeah. Very important.
Definitely, Bianca. It's a very good question. And I think because we made so much use of physical books that were not available, and even if they were, we couldn't use them because we should avoid touching the same surfaces. Everybody had to necessarily find resources that are online. And several publishers, they open for free in the first months all their resources. So I think that it was a kind of a network of support for schools, which was also good because the teachers who never used those kind of resources, they got to know them. And that's also something that we are probably going to keep after pandemic. And we felt that the students were so familiar because several students have or an iPad or a cell phone, and eventually even on a TV, you can access the platforms. And I think storytelling and manipulating books online became really alive. We had situations in which the books are being read out loud for different accents by people in different parts of the world. And when we think about bilingual education, that's amazing. I think the vocabulary is different. And if it's original, authentic literature, even better. We had an experience that we used to do before, but we kept and improved for remote learning. That is the roda de conversa about reading. So it's a kind of a circle that we do. Students choose a book, big chapter book. It's primary students, like Fundamental 1. They choose a big book. They have a month to read, and then they choose whatever different books. You don't have repeating books. And then they have to present to each other their experience reading the book. And we had only 2 tasks to be done. One, they couldn't give spoilers. That's something they really understand because they can't say how the book ends. And the second thing, they had to captivate and make everybody want to read the book, like advertising their own book. So it was amazing to see how much the students could be creative in preparing and presenting their roda de leitura. And this happened in both languages. The Portuguese teachers and the English teachers used the same strategy. So this was amazing.
Amazing. From the literacy point of view and also the soft skills point of view, that's amazing practice. Just 1 second before Rita says something. there was one very big question about a research or a article that Marceli had mentioned, and now we have the link in the chat feed. So please, if you're interested, it talks about involving parents in assessment for young kids. Rita, would you like to say something?
Well, I believe Selma mentioned something very important about how the publishers really contributed opening resources and helping us having access to the books. One experience I had that was really very interesting, and it happened in a couple of schools that I work with, was working together with reading Portuguese and English. So we really took advantage of the things that were being read in Portuguese so that the kids would work in, through another genre in English. So like from a narrative to a timeline, reading in Portuguese and doing something else in English about the same story. So that happened with books that they had access in Portuguese and books that they had access in English. And it started because usually the books that are like chosen for the Portuguese curriculum, they are physical books and they are bought by the students, by the families in the beginning of the year. And they, in many schools, they were sent home in the beginning of the pandemic because the families had to pass by the school and get like some material and take that kit of materials home for the kids to work during the pandemics. And then we started working with the stories in Portuguese, and that was also a very interesting experience for the teachers to work on planning together. The teachers in Portuguese and the teachers who would be teaching in English, and coming, starting from the same books, from the same literature, whether it would be in Portuguese or in English. But that was really very interesting. So we had like books being read in Portuguese and timelines or advertisings or invitations to read being done in English, and in both, also the other way around, things that were read in English and worked in Portuguese through any other genre, textual genre. So that was really an experience that we usually do in class when we are in the school, and that we could continue doing in the remote learning. That was really a lot of fun for most of the people. And the challenges were always those who have more difficulty in getting engaged with reading. And this is natural in all ages. We have those who really appreciate and read very easily, and those that we really have to motivate a little bit more. So I didn't see any loss in that. I saw like,
I have seen a presentation you've done on that in your channel, Bilingual Schools. I highly recommend you guys seeing. I hadn't seen this before, and it was actually open-minding for me. So, well, by the way, it's important to say, Sherina, I don't know if you have any channel, I mean, any online digital social media that you can share that people could, you know, follow you.
For reading, we contracted Tumble Books, which has been a great asset, and it covers books from the little ones all the way to high school. And so then we have the Tumble Books, which is for reading. We have the Padlets, which I'm sorry, let me go back. I think when a school or a group of educators decide they want to buy a platform, it's important to think about what is the purpose. So we took on various platforms for specific purposes. So the Tumble Books was specifically for the reading. Then the Padlet, which is for our collaborative output work. And I would also like to say to all teachers, there is a platform which is free. It's called Flipgrid, and it's a platform where children can do videos and mini podcasts, and that can be shared onto one site, which is lovely and totally free for teachers. Then we took on IXL for the mechanical learnings of reading, grammar, writing. So that was for a mechanical purpose where kids could become autonomous at home. And we took on Nearpod. Nearpod gives us, it has a range of classes. It's within Nearpod. You have embedded the A to Z reading library. There are classes shared in math, social studies, science. Schools can have a 1-month demo and kids really get engaged. So I think, like I go back to the beginning, your principles and values and expectations are non-negotiable. The platforms are not going to give you those. No, okay, I think that's I think that's a given. But the platform offers the teachers different resources to connect to our students.
Thank you very, very much. Also, I saw that someone was asking for some some reading lists. That I recommend you sending either an email or following the blog at bilingualeducation.com from Selma, or Bilingual Schools, Rita. Mine own is Dicas da Palumbo at Instagram. We have to close this at 12:30 sharp because they are getting ready for the next next event. Just to remind you, this is a BRAZ-TESOL big event for all teachers. So all during October, we're going to have presentations every morning and every afternoon, Saturdays and Sundays. They are free of charge for BRAZ-TESOL teachers, associates. That's a gift BRAZ-TESOL is offering to all its associates. And it's only, it's actually, there are a few that are even less than 30, but most of the presentations or the periods are cost only 30 reais. And they will be talking about several areas of the language teaching. So, so I cannot even say how honored I am to be here with you guys. And also thank Juliana and Daphne and Luciana Brentano, who's also part of this group. She couldn't be with us today for a personal reason. So I would like to thank you, the ladies who with me put together all of this, and everyone who has presented from 8:30 to now. I think it's, oh, of course, and I would like to thank our partners who actually put money on this and that makes this happen. So you can see them in your screen: Bridge, Faculdade de Cultura Inglesa, DISAL, DISOP, National Geographic Learning, and SBS. Thank you very much. Follow our SIG account, which is, oh my God, Ju, if I get this wrong, but it's BT Bilingual Education SIG. That's it. So please follow us, BT Bilingual Education SIG. Yes, I got it right. So follow us, and we'll be posting many new events and new things that, and we'll be communicating with you. Thank you so very much for all of this. And Nachi, we've got it right, 12:30 sharp. Bye-bye, ladies.
Thank you. You've all been wonderful. Thank you very much for a morning of learning.
Thank you all.
Thank you, girls. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.